Hey guys, welcome back to One Mouse One Dream. So today is the day that we are sharing what I'm going to be calling our journey. And yes, that is our journey to be parents. And it's going to be a hard video for me to talk about, and I just want to say thank you for letting me speak about and talk about what's been going on for these last 8.5 years. Yes, that's right, 8.5 years. So what I decided to do is to make this a two-part video. The last day and a half I realized that there's going to be just too much content to talk about. As I said earlier, it's been 8.5 years of a journey for us, and there's a lot that needs to be talked about and spoken about during that 8.5 years. So I wanted to make this into one video. Unfortunately, I think that it's just going to be better suited for two-part, and I hope you guys understand that. So I guess now's a good time as ever to start. Bear with me, as some parts of this journey and conversation is going to be really difficult for me, and that's where I was talking about in Tuesday's video that's going to be very raw and real, and I want to be as honest with you guys as possible. And during those 8.5 years, ever since we got married, we started trying right away to have a family. We knew, well, especially I knew, that there was always going to be a struggle to try to conceive because of my medical history. And that is, without getting into too many details, I have stage 4 endometriosis, which basically causes a lot of issues for my cycle, and one of the #1 contributing factors of this disease is infertility. Yay, right? But stage 4 is like the most severe. It's like the worst you could ever have, and it's not fun. I'm not gonna go into depth or details about what endometriosis is, but clearly it's nothing that's exciting or fun, especially when it comes to having your hopes and dreams of having a family be sort of, I guess, shattered at some point because it's hindering you to be able to get pregnant. We tried for about 2 years to conceive naturally on our own without going to a doctor. And to be honest, I wish we would have done it sooner now looking back, but who knew that we would still be doing this for 8.5 years without a baby of our own, or babies of our own. But nonetheless, we finally met with my OBGYN, and during the very first visit, she suspected my endometriosis was back with a vengeance, and it surely was. So she obviously did an ultrasound, or recommended us to go get an ultrasound done. We had to do it a couple weeks later, and sure enough, the results came back that my endo had come back with a terrible vengeance. So the next step that she had us do is to schedule surgery, which we had to wait, I think it was about 2 months or so, and this was around the fall of 2013 that this had all happened. And so my mom and Brad took me to the surgery. My mom was so sweet to be able to take off to spend, you know, the day with Brad while I was in surgery. It was supposed to be about an hour or so surgery. Unfortunately, it ended up being close to 3 hours. Actually, I think it was like 3.5 hours of a surgery. And when I was still in the recovery, the doctor had come out and spoken to my mom and Brad, and she basically said it was one of the worst stages of endometriosis that she had seen in a very long time, if not her entire career as a doctor. And because of that, she went ahead and did a procedure called flushing your tubes, which is basically seeing if the egg and sperm can meet in the tube to be able to get pregnant naturally. A lot of times endometriosis causes your tubes to be blocked, and unfortunately that was the case of mine. I was devastated. I knew that the chances of us getting pregnant naturally now were basically slim to none, because she said the one side was fully blocked, like 100%, no chance of anything happening. And the left side was pretty much 99.9% blocked as well. But she said there was a small little bit amount of fluid that was coming through. So she said it could take a miracle that you could get pregnant naturally. But she recommended us to just move straight forward to IVF. And at this point in our lives, like, I've heard of IVF. I never really like looked into it too much. You see it in the movies sometimes, you know, women going through it to try to conceive. But you never think that's going to be you. You never think that that's going to be what your life is going to result in, to trying to conceive and have a family. And it was now becoming ours. So, oh my gosh, I'm starting to get emotional already. Brad actually didn't tell me right away after recovering. He was trying to make me, you know, get a little bit more awake from the anesthesia since I had been under so long. And he had told me on the way home in the car, and I just started bawling. Like, one was on like heavy like pain pills, and or still left from like the IV and everything, and I was like sort of still sedated from the anesthesia because I don't do well with anesthesia. And he just didn't want to keep it from me any longer, so there was no perfect time to tell me. And so he just told me then, and it actually probably was better that he did, because I was able to then just go home and go to sleep. And of course I cried myself to sleep, because when you hear the word IVF, you know it's going to be a hard journey and an expensive journey and a journey of a million emotions. And I knew this isn't what I wanted, you know. I wanted to be able to just get pregnant like most other women do, or what you think most other women do, and be able to have our family, you know. I always dreamt of having like 2-3 kids, even more if God, you know, Lord willing, of course. And at this point I was just devastated into the fact that, where are we going to come up with this money? Does my insurance cover anything? Like, all these questions were starting to go through my mind. Like, well, when can we get started? How soon? You know, obviously, from as bad as the surgery that I had, how bad this endometriosis was, we had to wait for a few months before we could even look into anything, just because of how severe my endo was. During that time, we started looking into IVF doctors in the area that we were living. And we met with one doctor, and we didn't really have a good feeling about the doctor or the practice. And so we were like, okay, let's look at other places. What the hard thing is trying to get into an IVF clinic. If any of you guys know of anybody going through this, or if you've gone through this yourself, the wait list for new patient visits are very, very long to wait. And it makes you sort of disheartened to have to wait so long for something that you've been yearning for how many years or months, however long your journey has been so far, and then to have to wait to even initially get a patient consultation with the doctor. It's just very, like, frustrating, I guess you could say. And so we started looking into new doctors, and during this time I had an opportunity to open a new store for my company that I worked for at that time, and so we ended up moving. We finally moved, and we got settled. We were saving, of course, along the way for IVF, so it was sort of nice that we had to take a little bit of a break to be able to move. It helped us to save some more money and things to eventually put towards the IVF, because we knew it was going to be very expensive. We didn't know how much at that point, but we knew it was going to be expensive from just the research that we had been doing. We started to research new doctors in our new area that we were living in, and we came across the clinic that we felt had the best, I guess you could say, reviews and just recommendations from like my previous doctor and everything. So we booked an appointment. Of course, there was a long wait list, and we were not able to see this doctor until early 2015. Yeah, we moved in like spring, early summer of 2014, and we had to wait that long to get a new doctor appointment. At this point, you know, of course, during that whole year after I recovered from my surgery, of course, we were trying to have that miracle chance of conceiving naturally. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. Our first appointment started our official IVF journey, and that was in 2015, around January, February. During this time, we basically just sat and talked about what we've been going through, what our issues are, all of that kind of things. Obviously, they started talking about finances, and we got really scared. We got really overwhelmed by everything. I think we were scared of the unknown. We were scared of the cost. We were scared of, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? You know, and anything else you can possibly imagine that you might be thinking through at this point was going through our minds. And of course, our family knew that we were going to start this journey, so we of course had their love and support as well as our friends. But it still didn't make it any easier at this point. And so we started on this journey. We were able to start doing some testing and things, and I mean, this stuff as far as testing goes didn't start until probably around May or June. That's when like the cycles started. Even though we had the appointment in January, again, you have to sort of be put on a wait list as far as when you can start doing testing, because they only do so many patients per like month or per week. I don't know how they, you know, figure it out, or it's just based on, you know, what their clinic is able to take on at a certain time. And we did have a few hiccups along the way. We feel that it was pretty much the clinic and not like my body. At this point, we were just like, okay, we have all this invested into this clinic. We can't really change clinics this point in, because we've already, you know, invested so much money and time. So we just kept chugging forward. We were getting close to the point where I was going to start doing what they call the stim cycle. And I was really apprehensive, really nervous as far as giving the injections to myself. So not to go into too much detail, with IVF, obviously this involves needles, lots of medication in order to produce as many eggs as possible so that they can, you know, eventually be fertilized into what they call embryos, and then those embryos are transferred into the woman to try to get pregnant. I guess that's the really short and condensed version of this, but I've never been a fan of needles. It's really huge fear of needles, and I'm like thinking to myself, how am I going to give these injections? What am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to do this. But yet your mind is also thinking, no, you're going to do this because you want a child so much that you would do anything and you would go through anything to get there. Started the stim cycle, and things were going pretty smooth for the first about week or so, and then we had another roadblock. My stim cycle process was not going exactly how they wanted to, and so they decided to switch up the medication dosages and things. And at that point I was just sort of like, well, should we just stop and try again? Because at this point I didn't want anything to mess up our chances of having a baby, because we didn't know if we were going to be financially able to afford to do this a second time. The egg retrieval process is like the most expensive part of the IVF process, so that's why I just wanted to make sure that we were doing everything we possibly could and to give us the highest chances. And so the doctor's like, well, what we're going to do, instead of doing the egg retrieval and then a fresh transfer, what we're going to recommend, because of your history of endometriosis, we're going to do the egg retrieval, and then we're going to do another hysteroscopy, I can never remember how to pronounce it, to sort of check your insides to make sure everything looks good and there's no endo that would hinder the implantation of the embryo. So it was sort of a little devastating, because at this point the egg retrieval was around September of 2015, and that just meant we were going to have to wait until probably November to do a transfer. And at this point, you know, it's 2015 and we've been trying for 4 years, and I just wanted a baby, you know, and so did Brad. We did the retrieval. We were able to get, you know, the eggs retrieved, embryos created, and we were able to get 4 embryos out of our egg retrieval that were embryos that would be most viable for an embryo transfer to hopefully get pregnant with. But then I had to have this other surgery, wait a month for recovery, and then at the end of November in 2015, we did our very first embryo transfer. We decided, based on my age, I was now 35, decided to transfer 2 embryos to give us a higher chance of getting pregnant, and we were okay with the thought of having twins. So we transferred the embryos. It was actually on November 30th, my sister's birthday, 2015, and everything seemed to go pretty well. The next 2-week wait, which is the 2-week wait that women going through IVF, it's the most nerve-wracking, emotional 2-week wait ever to find out whether or not this has worked. You know, you put all your blood, sweat, and tears and money into something to hopefully get a great outcome. You're just like so nervous. Well, we did have a great outcome. We were pregnant. We were pregnant for the very first time. I saw a pregnancy test for the very first time positive, and we were over the moon. And your mind's just like, oh my gosh, like all of this heartache and all of the emotions and the roller coaster ride that we've been on, all the tests, all the procedures, everything, all the medications, it's all worth it to hear that you're pregnant. And we were so thankful. I mean, we were just so thankful. We were over the moon. At this point, we hadn't told our parents or anything yet because we just wanted to keep it to ourselves for the next like week or so. And then we came up with a great way to surprise the family. They were all coming over to our house to bake Christmas cookies, and Brad came up with this whole idea himself. He was gifting me a present, and it was a gift card, but it was a gift card to motherhood, maternity, and so he made me open it in front of everybody, and he was recording this, and we do have a copy of this video, although I don't know if it's still saved because I think Brad might have deleted it. I don't know, maybe he didn't. But he recorded the whole thing, and we were like, surprise, we're pregnant. And everybody started crying. Everybody was so over the moon with happiness for us that it finally worked and that we were finally pregnant and on the road to having a baby to bring home. The next week we had our first ultrasound to see if it was 1 or 2, and we had a feeling it might be 2 because of our high beta numbers. And we went for the ultrasound, and sure enough, there was 2 babies. We were pregnant with twins. And that same day, we called everybody and told them, you're not going to be a grandparent of 1, you're going to be a grandparent of 2. And everybody just couldn't believe it. They're just like, oh my gosh, you're kidding, right? And I just remember talking to everybody and just like, they were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, you're not only getting finally blessed with 1 baby, but you're getting 2. Like, what an amazing journey, right? And sorry, this part is really hard. I had to go to work that night, and I was at work for maybe about 45 minutes or so, and I just felt like a little bit, sorry, this is a little bit TMI, I felt like something wasn't right. I felt as if like my period had come. So I went to the bathroom, and sure enough, there was some blood. So I just was like, okay, Lindsay, relax, like this could be normal, this could happen. And I like let it go. I probably ignored it for about another 30 minutes, but then like I felt like it was coming on faster. And so I went to the bathroom, and sure enough, it had. And so at this point, I started to panic. I first called my mom, and I'm just like, Mom, is this normal? Like, does this happen? And she's like, I don't think that much, but you know, some women do. So I called the clinic, and they're like, I would go to the emergency room. So one of my sweethearts of an associate, she actually drove me there because she knew I was like really emotional. Brad met me there, and then my mom, my dad met us there as well. And this was probably by far like the worst night ever. Just that morning, we found out that we were pregnant with twins. And just like that, they were taken away from us. I don't know why. I still don't know why. I never will. Until one day when I'm no longer here on this earth will I know. But our joy and our excitement was very short-lived. I was very angry at God. I was very angry at anyone who was pregnant. I was angry at the fact that why is this happening to us? Why put us through this all? Why have so many highs of like great moments and then to have it just ripped from us? And I will tell you that it made it worse because it was 5 days before Christmas 2015. I didn't think I could go on. I didn't think I could move forward. I didn't want to go back to work. I didn't want to do anything. I had a really hard time. I was in a really dark place for, I'd say, at least 3 or 4 days. And I just was thinking to myself, this can't be happening. This can't be going on. Like, this is just not real. It's not true. I mean, anything you can think of, I was thinking. So moving forward, obviously we took some time to step back, and because I needed it emotionally and physically. And we didn't try again until March, and it didn't work. We transferred one embryo, it didn't work. So fast forward to May 2016, we were doing our final embryo transfer from our egg retrieval in 2015. And we were really nervous and cautious to think if this was going to work or not work, and we just tried to go in it with just positive attitudes and just try to be relaxed and just praying every day, every minute, every moment that we had. And in early June, we found out it worked. And we couldn't believe it. Well, it was actually the end of May that we found out that it worked. We couldn't believe it. And we were just so over the moon about it, because during this time was also the time that we had found out that I got a new job opportunity with Vera Bradley, and we were moving to Savannah, Georgia. So not only do we have that going on, but we also just found out we were pregnant for the second time. And we're like, this is what God has in store for us. You know, my thoughts were, okay, he wanted us to have this new job opportunity, this opportunity to move south, this opportunity to also be pregnant, and it was God's timing, you know. That's what we just kept saying to ourselves. I saw the heartbeat once with Brad, and then saw the heartbeat with my mom one more time before we moved to Georgia. And by the time we moved to Georgia, we were almost 3 months. We were almost at that point of, okay, we're almost in the clear, because they say that if you pass the first trimester, your chances of miscarrying go down significantly. Not, of course, there's chances of miscarrying after your first trimester, but your chances go down a lot lower. We were there for about a week. My mom ended up going home, and then Brad had gone to Charleston to train for his new job. And it was the night before I was to start at my new store for Vera Bradley. And that day I woke up feeling just a little crampy and just a little not myself, or at least I hadn't felt like that for a while. And I'm just like, okay, well, I'm getting further along in pregnancy. Maybe it's just that, you know. And the day goes on, it just something just wasn't feeling right. And by like 6 o'clock, I knew something wasn't right. So that's when I started calling some family members and just being like, what's going on? Like, what do you think this could be? At that point, obviously, we didn't have a doctor or anything in the area, so I was just gonna hope to wait till Monday so that Brad could come home and take me to like the emergency room and to see what's going on. I wasn't like in a ton of pain at that point, but I just knew something wasn't right. Boy, did things change pretty fast. Things changed pretty much in an instant, I guess you could say. By 7:30, 8 o'clock, I could barely sit down. I couldn't lay down. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't walk. I knew exactly what was going on. I was going into labor. Obviously, early labor. And by midnight or like 11 o'clock, I finally called Brad and I'm just like, it's happening. And he's like, no. And I'm like, yep. I'm like, we're losing this baby. And there's nothing I can do. Because I knew at that point, going to the emergency room, like, it already had started. Like, I basically was having contractions and there was nothing that they could have done. And by like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, I had passed the baby. It was so hard because we had just moved to a new location with nobody, and I was there by myself. Brad was in Charleston, and obviously he was driving home. He found me on the bathroom floor at like 3:30 in the morning. I had fallen asleep from obviously crying myself to sleep, and we lost the baby. I couldn't believe it. We had just moved. I was supposed to start work the next morning. Why were we going through this? We've been through so much already. Here we are going through another heartache. And I just couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. I was even more angry this time at God for letting this happen. But in my heart, I knew that, like, he doesn't give us more than we can handle, and I know that. But I just kept on saying, why? You know, why put us through these moments of joy to give us so many moments of heartache and despair? I eventually pulled myself together and was able to start work. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I think just because physically going through the emotions and the feelings of having a baby, even though it wasn't full term, I still felt everything that a woman would feel, just not to the extreme. It still was painful, not just like physically, but obviously emotionally. And at this point, like, I felt like that's it, we're done, because there was no extra money, because we had already saved so much money to put towards the, you know, process in Pennsylvania, that I'm like, okay, like, this is it. That was our last chance. And I just was really upset. And it was hard because I was away from my family and my friends, and of course Brad was there and he was so supportive. Every day it got better. you move forward, but you keep looking back sometimes, you know, and you remember all that pain that you went through. It doesn't go away. So at this point, it was now the fall of 2016, and things started to finally get better. And that next year we had, well, that fall we had made an appointment with a doctor in the area, and we had done that back in September, and we were able to get in to see him. I guess it was right around the middle of November. We got pretty lucky, and we looked at all of our options to be able to move forward again, and we somehow figured it out to afford to do one more cycle. And I think that's where I'm going to leave the video for today. Sorry to go end on like what's a really sad note, but I think this video is going to be about 22 minutes already, and there's still much more to come on this journey. I hope it's all making sense. I'm sorry if I'm making you cry. It's not my intent to make you guys feel sorry for us. This intent of me doing this, well, Brad and I doing this, obviously me talking to you, is because I just want to talk about it. And if some of you guys listen, that's great. If nobody listens, it's okay. Emotionally and mentally, like, I just need to talk about it, because I know that we're not the only ones going through this. I know there's lots of people who talk about their IVF and, you know, conceiving journey on YouTube and things, but what I will say before going on with our vlog for Tuesday is one of the reasons why I wanted to share this is because it's really hard. The hardest part of this whole journey is, and I don't want to, what I'm about to say is, I don't want this to come across as cold and mean, but it's really hard for us to sit back and see other people get pregnant or be pregnant or have kids, because we want so much for ourselves. So sometimes we pull back a little bit because we want that so much, and it's not because we don't want to be happy for those people, our friends or our family, but it really hurts. I know sometimes it probably hurts too much, and it shouldn't hurt that much, but it does. And it's hard for me at work. I work at a place where I sell bags to women. Obviously women are pregnant sometimes and they bring their kids in, and for the most part it's okay, but when I start hearing friends or family getting pregnant or announcing they're pregnant, it makes those next couple weeks harder, because you just wish that was yourself. Not that you're jealous, but I guess some people would think that I'm jealous. It's just because you yearn for that to happen to you. You know, Brad and I have been pregnant so far from 2015 to 2016. We've been pregnant twice, and it was taken away from us, and we still have yet to experience a take-home baby at this point. And you know, when you continue to hear people announce their pregnancy announcements, like, you pull back, or at least I do. It's a little easier for Brad, not that it doesn't hurt him anymore, because I know when we go to the store or to the restaurants and he sees little kids, the way he interacts with them is just, it melts my heart, because I want that for us together. I want that to be our baby one day, and it still isn't. And I don't know, I guess I'm just saying I'm sorry for how sometimes we pull back. because it's really hard, this journey that we're going on. And unless you've gone through it personally, you don't know how it is. I don't know what else to say at this point. I mean, infertility is something a lot of women and men go through, and it's not easy. It's not easy one bit. And you know, it's hard hearing some of the comments that people say, oh well, it will happen, you just gotta relax, or it will, you know, happen naturally, it'll just when you're least expecting it, you know, or why don't you just adopt, or this and that. You know, for us, for me personally, I want to experience being pregnant. I want to be experienced. I'd take the 9 months of being nauseous and throwing up every single day, every single minute. I would take that in a heartbeat in order to be able to experience being pregnant and having our take-home baby. I mean, I would inject 5,000 needles a day with medication if that's what it took to get us to have a take-home baby. There's nothing I wouldn't do to have that, obviously legally, of course, but there's nothing I wouldn't do to have that happen. And now I feel like this video is going to be like 30 minutes long. But I guess I'm just going to leave it at that and stop rambling on at this point, because I feel like the last 8 minutes are now not really making sense. But I'm just talking about my emotions, and it's been really hard sometimes. And I think for those of you who've followed us this long, there's been a couple times where we've stopped making videos, and it's because I was going through some tough times emotionally. I've always been a good person at, as far as like being able to talk through my emotions or cry them out. I never hold things in. I sometimes don't always show it because I don't want other people to feel sorry for us, and that's not what this is about. It's just, for me, it feels good letting this out. It feels good to talk about it, and it feels good because I know some of you do really care about both Brad and I, and I think that's what made me have the courage to start talking about this with you guys. And I feel like that's right at the moment. I feel like it's good, you know. There's more to come still. Obviously I'm ending this right around the beginning of 2017, when we are about to do a second egg retrieval with our new doctor in Savannah, and that will be on the next video. I just want to say thanks again for listening and letting me start telling our journey to trying to have children, and being hopeful for what the future holds, and just letting our voices be heard. So thank you, and stay tuned for the second part of this journey for us and our hopes and dreams of wishes to have our child of our own. Thanks, guys.